The new iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max has been released. With all the latest camera upgrades and features, what does this mean for mobile filmmakers? Let's find out. What's up? I'm ronald.james.baculo, filmmaker, comic book creator, and mental health ambassador, here to help empower you to tell better visual stories with the best filmmaking tips, tricks, and techniques. These last few years, Apple has been rather aggressive with their marketing in terms of promoting the iPhone as a Hollywood-level piece of filmmaking equipment. The launch of the iPhone 13 Pro was one of their bigger leap towards a truly professional filmmaking workflow, with features such as cinematic mode and the ability to shoot in the industry-standard ProRes video codec. The new iPhone 14 Pro improves and refines those pro filmmaking features with its new, bigger, and improved camera sensor, while adding a few more tricks up its sleeves. Disclaimer, I've always been a proud Samsung owner and user. The iPhone 14 Pro marks the first time I've owned an Apple iOS device, and so this iPhone 14 Pro experience is even more fresh coming from the Android side of the fence. The main or wide camera on the iPhone 14 Pro is the real jewel of this latest camera array. It sports a brand new 1/1.3 inch size 48 megapixel quad pixel camera sensor at a 24mm focal length with an f1.78 lens aperture. The new sensor not only increases image resolution, but vastly improves low light performance. This camera also has the second generation sensor shift optical image stabilization, which means it is the sensor that moves and stabilizes instead of the physical lens. Even without the headlining gimbal-like action mode, the video capture is very smooth and stabilized. What I really love about this main camera is the natural depth of field it produces, a true depth of field unlike the software created one in the cinematic mode, but more on that later. In the iPhone 14 Pro, there's a new 2x telephoto zoom, which isn't actually a real optical zoom, but a lossless crop of the super high resolution 48 megapixel sensor image. Typically, an optical zoom is better than a digital zoom, but in this particular implementation, there is zero loss of quality because the crop is taken from an oversampled image. Another advantage of this 2x telezoom is that it's still using the same sensor as the main camera, rather than the separate and less superior sensor of the actual telelens. So you will get the benefit of the same low light performance and depth of field effect from the f1.78 aperture. Specs wise, the 3x telephoto lens and sensor appears to remain the same from last year's iPhone 13 Pro, although with some minor improvements, albeit from software and AI enhancements, like from the new photonic engine. It's a 12 megapixel sensor with 77mm focal length and f2.8 lens aperture. The 2x telephoto still has better depth of field and low light performance because of its wider aperture and bigger sensor, but the 3x tele can still capture beautiful footage, especially when the lighting is right and it has that true telephoto compression of foreground and background. The ultra-wide has always been my favorite camera on my Samsung phones. When it comes to video, it's super fun and I just find it more useful than the boring telephoto. After switching for the first time to Apple, I have to say I'm liking the iPhone's ultra-wide even better. The ultra-wide on my old Samsung lent towards a more extreme wide angle, almost GoPro territory, but the iPhone 14 Pro one seems just right at a 13mm focal length and 120-degree viewing angle with little to no distortion at all. The previous iPhone 13 Pro wide-angle camera had a wider aperture, but this 14 Pro ultra-wide has a new and improved bigger 1/2.55-inch sensor, which equates to clearer image quality and better low-light performance. The macro mode in iPhone 13 was a surprising little addition and is improved even more in this iPhone 14 iteration. It works with the ultra-wide camera and is automatically turned on when you move the camera close to a subject. You'll know it's on when the flower icon is showing. In my last iPhone shot short film, I was surprised how handy it was to take certain shots with my add-on macro lens, such as extreme close-ups of eyes or text being typed on screen. Now it'll be even more easier and accessible to take unique macro shots to spice up your visual storytelling repertoire. When cinematic mode was first introduced with the iPhone 13, I easily scoffed at the feature as a gimmick that reeked of fakeness, as well as the disappointing reductive presumption that cinematic simply means a blurred background. Also, calling it cinematic mode without even the option to shoot in 24 frames per second, a typically filmic and cinematic frame rate, seemed like a big misstep. Thankfully, Apple listened and not only added the 24 frames per second frame rate, but also upgraded the resolution to 4K. More than ever, 4K resolution is a widely accepted video resolution, making the cinematic mode this time much more usable, especially in professional projects. Using it hands-on myself, I have to say I'm really impressed by the ingenuity put into this feature, like the fact you can intuitively rack focus during the shoot and in post-production. Rack focus in itself is part of the visual storytelling language of film, so it's beyond just the visual gimmick. What I found is, although the blurry depth of field effect is fake and artificial, dialing the effect back down to a more subtle setting makes the cinematic mode more realistic and acceptable. Also, shooting hair edges or through leaves and glasses are dead giveaways of this fake effect, so just be mindful of your shots and avoiding such situations when possible. Video stabilization on smartphone cameras these days have come a long way and is pretty impressive on most modern flagships. Apple goes an extra yard with the iPhone 14's new action mode, which is another level of stabilization that promises near gimbal-like results. Essentially, the iPhone is processing the oversized image captured by the new large sensor, translating frame by frame to make the smoothest footage ever. The drawback is your footage will be cropped from 4K to 2.8K resolution, something to keep in mind when working with a 4K workflow or final output. I'm astounded by the results actually, because it looks less Jello-like as how it is with other smartphones, and might very well pass for legit smooth gimbal shot footage. The cropping can be annoying if you really want to capture a wider shot, but in all honesty, the regular stabilization is pretty rad too, not too far from the stableness of action mode, and you get to keep your 4K resolution. When the iPhone 13 Pro came out, the ability to record in ProRes was really the only feature I was excited about. ProRes is a filmmaking industry standard video codec that has the least compression, maintaining the highest video quality as possible, at the cost of course of bigger file sizes. And when I say big, I mean humongous. To give you an idea, filming in ProRes 4K 10-bit HDR will get you 6 GB per minute of footage. What this means is not only do you have the best quality footage ever, but you are also able to edit and work with the smoothest performance on your editing software, because there's less processing to be done with this almost lossless uncompressed format. So no more laggy playback when editing with smartphone footage on a not so powerful computer or laptop. Additionally, when you use a professional filmmaking camera app like Filmmaker Pro or ProTake, you can actually choose different flavors or levels of ProRes. From ProRes Proxy, which is slightly compressed footage to maintain smaller file sizes, all the way to 4444 lossless uncompressed video quality. The question is, does ProRes have a significant increase in quality over the regular compressed iPhone footage to make working with the file sizes worth it? Remember, the iPhone 14 series still uses the slow Apple Lightning cable, rather than the faster and superior USB-C type. Transferring gigabytes upon gigabytes of ProRes footage to your computer is going to be a bitch. Personally, I use ProRes footage all the time as a professional video editor, and more than video quality, the biggest advantage of this codec for me is the smooth workability of using that footage. If you work with a slower editing computer, then working with ProRes files helps a lot. But if you're looking to capture the best quality footage, here's a side-by-side comparison with regular compressed iPhone footage to see for yourself if the difference is worth it. Do keep in mind, YouTube is doing its ugly compression thing, so this might not be the most accurate representation. Lastly, I just want to share my user experience of using the iPhone 14 Pro for filmmaking and in general. As I mentioned, this is actually the first iPhone I've ever owned after using Samsung flagship phones for so long. iOS is definitely annoying to me coming from Android. Little things like camera settings can't be accessed from the camera app itself, but from the general phone settings. Also, while the design is pretty, the actual build construction of the phone is more like a fragile ceramic vase. My naked 2-day-old iPhone 14 Pro dropped out of my pocket while I was crouching to tie my daughter's shoelaces. It was barely a foot high and the screen still cracked on my second day of owning this thing. I swear I still don't rock a tempered glass protector on my Samsung S10, and my daughter's dropped it so many times on tiles and other hard surfaces, and it still survives without a scratch or a crack. So annoying. Finally, although I hate iOS as an operating system and Apple as an elitist ecosystem, I do have to admit the camera experience is quite enjoyable and the video quality is really top class and the best on any smartphone out there. Some annoying iPhone video flaws are still there, like the ghostly white flare dot thing and the dynamic tone mapping issue where you can never truly lock manual exposure. Also, Apple still notoriously does their AI over-sharpening, contrasty, over-processed look to the image. But other than that, I'm definitely enjoying and getting a lot out of the filmmaking features of this phone. I'm curious, what are your thoughts on the new iPhone 14 Pro, especially for filmmaking and telling stories? Is it worth the premium price or incremental upgrade if you're coming from a more recent iPhone? Also, are we finally getting close enough to Hollywood level filmmaking, or putting the power of professional filmmaking into the hands of ordinary or aspiring filmmakers? Mobile filmmaking for me has always been about the democracy of filmmaking and making it accessible to the masses despite budget or skill limitations. Although you may have to pay a little extra for this premium iPhone experience, it does have the potential to get you to your filmmaking dreams. Hey, if you found value in this video, please do help support the algorithm by hitting the like button or subscribe to my channel to see more awesome content like this. Until next time, reframe your mind.